Welcome to the Heat of Command podcast, Mastering the Art of Fire Service Leadership,
where we, your hosts, aim to teach you how to use introspection and self-reflection to be your most authentic, genuine self, leader, and human being.
And now, here are your hosts. This is Kyle Matusik.
And Kerry Henderson. Thanks for joining.
Welcome back, everybody. Kyle and Kerry here on what is a beautiful day in Virginia, and I believe in Illinois as well.
Yep.
We are finally maybe tipping the corner from what was a really harsh winter here in Virginia. We saw more snow than Kyle did in Illinois, which is kind of crazy. What Kyle and I have been busy behind the scenes working on some rebrand stuff that we really wanted to be intentional about and make it mean something and not just rebrand for the purposes of rebranding, but putting some meaning behind it. And we're super excited to share that soon. It's not quite ready yet, but it means something to both of us. And I think it's going to mean a lot to our listeners as well when we spill the beans on that. So that is soon to come. In today's episode, we've talked a lot in the past about emotional intelligence. We've talked at length about critical thinking and decision making and just what that means for your leadership abilities and being empathetic and kind of being in the trenches with your folks and what that does for people. And today we want to go in a little bit different direction and talk about, does going through struggle or extreme adversity or struggle or pain, does that make you a better leader? And can you be really effective if you haven't gone through something like that? And that's our challenge today. That's our question today. And what does going through struggle or going through failure or loss, what does that do for all of those topics that we've talked about? Does it make you a better leader? Does it make you more empathetic? Does it improve your decision making and critical thinking ability? Does it make you more emotionally intelligent? I don't know. Let's see where this goes.
Yeah, I think there's a lot to uncover. And, you look at a lot of, for lack of better words, the old school way, and it's not just in the fire service, but it's just like rub sand on it, hop up and keep going when you face some challenges or things affect you negatively. And a lot of times throughout, my career and stuff, like that was the way. And is that an effective way of going through struggles, just rubbing sand on it and moving on and persevering on? Sure, there are times and place for that. I don't want to discredit that at all. Sometimes we just have to pick ourselves up and grind on. Absolutely. But if we don't face those struggles head on, and we don't go through the nastiness of struggles, we try to cope our way around struggles. Does that, in essence, create an effective leader? And from the surface, and when we look at that question, I don't think it does, right? Avoidance does not make better leaders. Going through stuff, regardless of what it may come off as, or what's the word, your reputation during that struggle may change multiple times over. But how do you just remain resilient and get through the struggle? And then in the end, what does that do for your leadership ability, right? Because when we look at struggle, we know that as you go through struggle, instead of just, rubbing sand on it, but you get into the dirty mud of a struggle, regardless if it's personal, professional, regardless of what that struggle is. It refines your character, it builds your resilience, and it teaches you a lot of things like humility. And all those things together are the things we talk about, right? Authentic leadership. And so I think struggle is very important. I believe there's only one thing promised to us in this life, and that is to struggle. So if we know that, it's how do we take this approach when we meet an adversity to overcome that, to build our leadership ability?
Yeah. And the only thing promised to us is struggle. And I think that is something that you and I have talked about biblically and where that comes from. And I think it'd be really cool to do a whole episode just about where that comes from, and why that means something to us. But yeah, and I can think back to, and even not huge, I can think definitely of huge mistakes I've made and big failures and struggle, but even the small little ones in the firehouse that I've made and as I've changed roles in my career and things that I've done, every single one of those has done something for me. And I think back on those and think, wow, A, I'd never do that again, or B, like what an impact it had on me to change and do differently. And how do I share those failures in a way to show others so they don't have to? They'll make their own, but I just think of little things along the way, not even not just the big ones that made a difference for me.
Yeah, it's like the leaders, they know what it's like to fail and then be resilient and rise again after that failure. But I think the key there is as new people come on, they, like you said, will never make the same mistakes you did. And you can see an organization where people continually make the same mistakes generation after generation, there's no effective leadership there because we're not passing on the mistakes we've made. We're keeping them to ourselves, or, it's just we did not face that adversity good enough. I don't want to use the word good enough. We just didn't face that adversity, right? We just kind of sucked it up and moved on. So we didn't take any lessons from that. We just met a challenge and kind of moved on from it and let it be, essentially. So then we're not able to pass those lessons on generation to generation in order to stay progressive as an organization and constantly moving forward, and I think struggles is the area where you can move forward, is the opportunity to move forward is through the struggle, right? We know we don't grow through comfortable situations, even though as human beings, we love comfort. We go to our coping mechanisms. We go to the things that make us feel safe and secure all the time. It's human nature. I get it. But that real growth happens when we're uncomfortable. And uncomfortable usually happens most of the time during a struggle. And that could last, days to weeks to months to years, who knows how long, depending on whatever that struggle is. But how do you maintain that course to actually hit it head on? And then on top of that is the environment there that allows you to go to battle during that struggle, to where you're getting picked up and people are cheering you on and allowing you to continue to grow regardless of how comfortable it may be.
Yeah. And there's a lot of programs out there in the military model of training and in some groups like SEALs and all of that, where really it is that the adversity they go through together and what it does for your character and your resilience and making decisions under stressful situations and all that. But personal struggle too, not just struggle in your career or failure at something in your career, but personal struggle. And I think for me, there's been there's been both sides. There has been professional and personal, but I think for me personally, some of my struggles have totally, not totally, but have really defined who I wanted to be when I came out on the other side of that, and how I wanted to approach things and handle things because of stuff in my personal life. And gosh, it made me stronger. Like, and sometimes you come out on the other side and it's like, man, if I could go through that, I could go through
Yeah.
anything. I could just, everything else starts to come into a different light, or a different, you see things from a different perspective at that point, because like, man, some things are just not that important. Some things are just not that big of a deal to me anymore. And I can make the decisions on those things quicker and easier because, like, this other thing that I had to make decisions on were so hard and so tough. So now it's a little bit easier.
Yeah, that perspective shift is
Yeah.
it's amazing, right? You view life and things a certain way and then something happens and all of a sudden poof, you're viewing things a completely different way. So it's kind of just it's it's inspiring, right? But going through the struggle in and of itself is challenging because a lot of times you may not realize or are discouraged through that and you don't realize the complexity of that struggle or what it's doing to you until afterwards. And then you're able to sit back, reflect back, and be like, wow, I needed to go through that. I didn't like going through it, but it did provide me a new perspective. It provided me a lot of lessons. It provided me an opportunity to grow and learn. And then from those, that just it builds your ability to be an effective leader. A lot of times in organizations, we preach, right? We preach these things about struggles and overcoming and doing it. And it's easy to talk about, but how is it demonstrated? And that's, I think a lot of times when we look at leadership and leadership roles, what are we preaching versus what are we doing? And we've talked about this, actions and words, are two completely different things. And I think w- when you can demonstrate the ability to go through a struggle and people see that and you come out the other side, one or two things are going to happen. Either people are going to respect you more or they're going to continually question, like, well, what's going on, and it just depends on the environment that you're in on how it's going to be received. But with that, it's still knowing that you're doing the good work and somebody's going to respect that along the way. And I think that's the most important part. So it's really staying the course during those struggles and just, I wish sometimes there were easy words to share, but sometimes you just got to grind through it and take the lessons and see what the world's trying to teach you. And maybe it's a shift of perspective or it's a shift of something, but it absolutely is a tool that is going to help you build your leadership ability. It's going to help you become a better human being, and it's going to do so much for you. So these struggles, I think they're very important to face head on.
Yeah, and this may be a bit of a sidebar, but something came to mind is, we see folks in our organizations that we know are going through something tough, right? And we preach, everyone does, that we're going to take care of our folks, and when they've got something going on, we're going to love them through it and we're going to support them. And I think in our hearts we mean that. But sometimes it takes a lot for us to recognize when that is taking place. So I've seen this recently where we have some folks that I know personally have some stuff going on, and I can tell their performance is different at work. Maybe not necessarily at fire scenes or emergency scenes, but some of our, some of our rock star folks that are normally very on top of committee stuff or leadership stuff of crew stuff, station life stuff, a- are maybe, and I wouldn't even say they're not doing a good job. They're still fine, but it's just not their normal. And I hear people say, like, well, what's going on with this person? Or they're not doing this, and you're like, that they're going through something. And this is that time where we said we'd be there for people like this in this situation. It's not just helping them in their personal lives, it's supporting them and being patient with them while they work through it, because it is going to affect work sometimes.
Mhm.
And these are those examples. So yeah, sorry, sidebar, just made me think of that. But
No, I mean, those are valid points. It's we want to tell all our listeners, like everybody, including yourself, you're going to struggle at some point in your life, right? We know this. We can try to prepare for it, but a lot of times we don't even know what's coming next, right? But you're going to struggle, and the people around you are going to struggle, and the people that you lead are going to struggle. And what does it look like to help yourself, right? And take care of yourself through those struggles. And then what does it look like to actually go out and help your colleagues and your subordinates and the people around you to overcome those struggles? Because I'll tell you right now, people don't want to hear, I think some of the biggest thing that you should not be doing is telling people they shouldn't be feeling that way, or they shouldn't think of things in a certain way, or they should just get over it. That's life, all those sayings to just kind of quickly sweep it under the rug. A lot of times it's that validation. And I think therein lies the breakdown, right? If you haven't gone through a struggle, or you approach struggles just with that simple mindset of, I just got to move on, there's no way that you're going to be able to help others overcome that, right? You have to have gone through a storm, right? In order to help other people go through a storm. So when you face those struggles, it's not just sweeping it on the rug, and that's going to prepare you for other people when they go through those struggles. So there's where the encouragement lies, is we can't just brush things off for ourselves first and foremost, right? We have to be able to take care of ourselves, understand what the struggles look like, and who are the people that I'm going to surround myself with to help me get through this? What lessons am I going to learn from this? How am I going to grow? How is my perspective going to change? Like, what am I supposed to be learning through this time? time period. And then with those tools, as you grow and get older and more mature, then it's an opportunity to help other people. And you have all this then experience in terms of overcoming and resilience. And I mean, that is just untouchable in the leadership world, right? Because they're very personal experiences. And when you can bring those to the table, that is just absolutely powerful for the people in which you lead.
Yeah, and people always say actions speak louder than words, but I think in a lot of cases, things we're talking about now, words matter
Yeah.
and the words that you say matter. So when you're talking about going through a storm and relating to bringing through, someone else through a storm, if you've been through a different storm, you can't pretend to know their storm, right? You can know you can know struggle, and you can know, what worked for you. But I think it's important for our listeners to know that the words you say to people in times of grief really matter. And you can't just, it's not always just enough. Like, I don't know what to say, so I'm just going to say something. Sometimes that can really backfire. And examples of that, like if you've never been through a pregnancy loss, if you've never been through infertility, if you've never been through the loss of a child, the loss of a parent, things like that come to mind. It's not as simple as just saying something because you wanna be supportive, because sometimes those things are worse. So I just wanted to bring that up, that y if you've been through something really tough, you are probably more sensitive to that anyways, right?
Mhm.
You know what people have said to you that made you feel worse. So, like, just get over it, or you should it could be worse. Y You've probably had people say those
Oh,
things to you,
yeah.
and so you know better than to say those to other people, and you're probably a little bit more empathetic to the fact that I can't just show up to this person not having gone through what they've been through and just saying something. I need to be authentic and say, "I don't know what to say to you.
Mhm.
I don't know what to say because I know nothing will make it better, but I'm here."
Yeah.
Right?
Yep.
Sometimes that's all you need to say, but saying the wrong thing is worse
Yeah,
than anything at all.
that
To me.
brings like a quick little memory for me. One of our firstborn, Adeline, she was very colicky for 3 months. The worst part about having a colicky baby was everybody telling you how to fix a colicky baby. It's like, no, you don't
Yeah.
understand. You need to feed him more. You need to do this. You need to do that. It's like, that's the last thing you need. You need somebody to just show up and take the baby and give you a break, right? But this also bridges over into kind of that, and I don't want to discredit this by any stretch of the imagination, but when we look at peer support teams, this is like the downfall of them is we have these teams and there's a place for them. I'm not discrediting that, and I do believe there is a place for them, but sometimes when you have not faced certain adversities or challenges, the last thing and last place you should be is talking to someone about a situation they may be going through and you have no idea about, because that could get very challenging for both people, right? Whether it's just bad advice or not saying the right words, it could become very challenging. So it's like, use caution in those situations. And are we pairing people up appropriately with these teams to ensure that we're getting the result that we want? Because just putting somebody in a group of, you know, eh, for me, miscarriage, right? Put me in a group of a bunch of firefighters who aren't married to help me get through this is not going to work, right? And a lot of times we think that we're going to be there for you no matter what. And, sometimes it's about pairing people up to ensure that we're getting through the appropriate struggles and getting the appropriate assistance that we need too. So, but that comes down to knowing your people and knowing yourself and where the strengths and weaknesses are within your organization. So we always know, like, hey, this is somebody who could help this person versus that person versus this person. And it's just every time we talk, it's like this leadership thing is just so intertwined with so many different things. And we can go so many different ways with it when we look at it. And it's just so complex. And the complexity of it just grows and grows and grows. And, yeah, I mean, just simply put, it's so complex on so many different ways that we can view leadership and what it looks like. And that's why the conversations are fun, to just kind of look at all the different aspects of it in terms of how to be effective to the people that you're surrounded by.
Yeah. And now it's another thing came to mind too when you were saying that. The knowing your people and pairing them up with the right people, super, super, super important. And I think you have to be careful with that too sometimes, because sometimes you pair people up and there's like, I don't know what the right word is, but like this trauma bond kind of
Yeah.
thing. Like, like, I've been through a divorce and you've been through a divorce. Like, let's compare war stories and like, is that helpful or not?
Right.
But at the same time, like an person who's never been married, never been through a custody battle, you can't pair them up with somebody
Right.
going through a nasty custody, struggle. So it is a delicate
It
situation and
is.
sometimes left best to the mental health
Yep.
professionals, right?
Absolutely.
But having peer folks there to check on and make sure you're getting what you need and you're feeling loved and supported and cared for and all that stuff. Very, 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 very important. But it also made me think about when you go through something like that and when you come out the other side and you've dealt with something so hard and your confidence, what that does for your confidence. And I've seen this happen to people around me too that maybe weren't always as confident in situations, but the stress and pressure of going through something tough and going through a struggle and then coming out on the other side and the confidence you have, it's like, okay, my brain is now wired to handle stress. So new stressful situations just don't seem as stressful. And it helps your critical thinking and your decision making because you've had to live in, for some people, you've had to live in a very stressful situation for months and months and months while you went through whatever you're going through. And so now it's like this short term stressful event I'm at, it's like, oh, no, no problem. No
Mhm.
problem at all. And I can see that for when that happens for people. That happened to me personally. I think it helps your creativity too, because if you're going through something hard and all the solutions you're trying to make work aren't working, so you got to come up with something new and you come up with creative ways to handle things and that helps in every aspect of your life. I think too, and I see this with if you newly promote folks that haven't been through a lot, like maybe they're great, leaders, fire leaders, but you almost have to earn that. You have to kinda earn this, like, you've been in the trenches kind of thing, or you've been through something tough, and then it's like, "Okay, now I really can get behind them because I've seen them handle this struggle," or whatever. So, right when I first got promoted to captain, I don't know if I've ever told you this story. I had been promoted to captain for all of, like, 5 minutes, well, like, maybe 2 weeks. They sent me out to a station, and there was a firefighter out there, and she was artistic, and she was paint we had a kitchen table, and she had taken the kitchen table apart, and she was painting a mural on it, and she had painted a firefighter in gear kneeling in front of a flag, and she had changed the stars to have 343 stars on there to represent the firefighters killed in 9/11. Beautiful painting, beautiful. Well, right before the table was finished, some other firefighters complained that it was misrepresenting the flag and that the flag code says this and the flag code says this. And so there's these conflict. Well, then people that supported it were writing letters to the chief in support of it. So it became this whole thing. And so I'm on shift one day and I get a call from my battalion chief. He says, "Hey, Kerry, the fire chief and the deputy chief are on their way to see you." And I'm like, "Well, I've only been promoted like 2 weeks. I didn't really get comfortable in this. Sounds like I'm getting demoted for letting this woman paint on this table." So they come down and it was one of those where, I had to make a decision because they were like, "Well, we could charge her with defacing county property because she painted on this table and, all this stuff." And they were just gonna throw it in the dumpster basically. And so it was one of those things like I knew at that point I had to stand up and do what I felt was right and defend her and defend that. And anyways, it was like I knew this is like early in my career and if I don't stand up for what's right, that's how the rest of my career is going to go. And that's what I felt like. I felt like, okay, I got to do the right thing right now, even if it's hard. And I'm standing up to the fire chief who is n- not going to agree with me at all, but I got to. So I just felt like that was the right thing to do at that time. And it changed everything for me going forward. Not everything, but it changed a lot for me going forward. It's like, okay, I stood up when this was tough and difficult. I can stand up again when I need to. So
Mhm. Yeah, it's like all those experiences just build us up and again have some valuable lessons within them, regardless of how ugly or uncomfortable it makes us. And you hit on a point. So just to maybe go down a little bit deeper, if everything had come easy for you, or just take that thought, if everything comes easy for somebody, would you be, personally, would you be the leader you are today, or do you think that if ever, there's people that we've noticed throughout our lives, maybe not necessarily in our organizations, where things just appear to come very easy for them. Would they be effective leaders? I mean, when we look at everything that we're discussing today, does that make an effective leader if everything kind of has been handed to you, you've skated through, really no public knowledge of any struggles or adversity, and you kind of just skate through life, which, then I'm not saying it's a bad thing, but what about leadership ability then?
I think I I don't think I think you can be a just fine leader.
Okay.
Right.
I
I
like
think
that.
you I think you can be just fine without having to go through something catastrophic but I do think going through something like that and coming out on the other side, it does something for you. And it may not be even visible to other people, but it may just be something you feel inside. So for me, the confidence and the ability to deal with stress, like super stress, and to see things in a different light, and probably to be more empathetic. I've always been very empathetic, but to be empathetic in spots that I probably wouldn't have been before because I didn't understand it enough. So yeah, I don't think there's an easy answer to that, which I knew when we recorded this, it wouldn't be easy for me to answer that, but I think you can be just fine. But I do think there is something to be said about the people that do go through something tough and come out on the other side, and just what it does for them personally. How about you? What do you think?
Yeah, I kind of look back, and when I see or watch, maybe some TED Talks or on YouTube, watching people talk and maybe talk about leadership or things of that nature, it tends to be, I don't know, I would say majority probably come from the military, fire, police, EMS. And so that right there just poses a question, because in our jobs and all those jobs, you face adversity every day, right? And now we're well accustomed to it. So for us, it might not really look at it like adversity, but at one point it was, and we overcome challenges every single day, regardless if it's the cause we're running or the equipment or staffing, regardless, right? We're overcoming stuff every single day. So I think it allows those industries to, I think in the public eye, in terms of leadership, is a step above, just based on their soul experiences. So if you look at that and their lives weren't as easy, or the challenges they faced in combat, we hear a lot of combat vets that go up and speak, and people involved in elite forces, things like that. So they, right? Everybody knows that they saw some things and they overcame some things, and that just portrays into what they present. So I think you're right. I don't know if you've never faced that kind of adversity, are you going to be able to get to that next level? Now, with that said, there's no way for you to go out there and give yourself that adversity. Like, we're not here saying like, well, you should go do this to make yourself enter some struggling points in your life. Like, no, don't go do that. They're bound to come, right? So it's just very interesting to look at. But I think there is that step above when you face challenges and you overcome challenges and you work within certain environments, that it just builds a different level of character in people. And it brings knowledge that is just not it's so common out there. So there is that. how struggle does refine you and makes you think different and build so many different components to what it takes to be an effective leader. Now, you still can learn those components of being an effective leader without going through the struggle, but we all know the difference of what it is to read a textbook and learn something and actually apply it with your hands and your mind and critical thinking. And those are two different learning domains, to where the latter, I think just teaches us a lot more. And I think life and experiencing life just teaches us a lot more.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, for definitely.
Right.
For sure, you have to kinda live through it. And and it's interesting, you're when you talk about folks that maybe haven't necessarily gone through something like that, and, it's not your fault you haven't
Right.
that that opportunity, and
Right.
I hate to say it that way, that opportunity has not come to you yet, but you can't always play it safe.
Right.
If you're always playing it safe, that opportunity definitely probably isn't gonna come to you, at least in a professional capacity. And I'm not saying you need to sign up to join the Navy SEALs.
Right.
I'm
Right.
not saying you need to run into a building that is gonna collapse because you need to go through struggle. That's a bad example, but, like, I'm just saying, like, making hard decisions or standing up for what's right or going against the grain when something needs to make a change. Those things, make a difference, make a huge, huge difference, and it's interesting to me, and I don't even know why this really came to mind, but it does. I've noticed lately, and this has been in the last few years, 2 or 3 years, that some of the departments around me, when I meet their people or I know their people, I can tell where they're from. I can tell what department they're from just by meeting them, and it's like, "You're a such and such from such and such department," because they all kind of make decisions the same way, behave kind of the same way, have the same mindset, which isn't necessarily bad in some instances. But in some instances it is, because you are reproducing firefighters that have groupthink in a culture where you need to go against the grain. And so I see firefighters that work there that act the same and talk the same and make the same decisions and behave the same way. And then I see some in those organizations and they're different. And I'm like, yes, for you. How hard is it to live in an organization where you're different and you're not caving and you're making your way and you're doing your thing? But gosh, I bet that makes them very resilient, very tough, and probably a strong person to begin with to be able to do that. You come to mind in that instance too, but I've seen that around me here too. So
Y-
kudos to those folks.
Yeah. And, in those situations, it's not like that's not easy to do.
Yeah.
Right? Especially in our culture, because you're going to get labeled, and but that's the resilient part of it, how you overcome. And I think, when you talk about those organizations where where they came from, that's very interesting that you can spot that. So it's like, are those leaders in those organizations, do they lead in a way where they have confidence because of their experience, or are they still carrying the weight of their past struggles? Right. And I think a lot of time, again, this kind of just bridges back to mental health. And do a lot of people just carry the weight of past struggles, regardless if it was a bad childhood, bad whatever, bad calls? Are we just carrying those with us because there aren't the environments to overcome those, or we're too scared to overcome those and put the work in, or we're just trying to sweep it under the rug when we should be facing these struggles head on? So, you know, is that leadership there based on experience, or are they leading based on past struggles? And I think a lot of times when you can pinpoint an organization based on a personality, it's like they are still carrying on to past struggles, and will use the term tradition or that's our culture, when in reality it is past struggles that we have not overcome as an organization. And so they just perpetuate on and on and on. And you can see it through generation after generation. And you're right, you can see it in the organizations and know exactly where they came from. And it's the stuff we're talking about here today, it's not easy. None of this stuff is easy if you want to be an effective leader. And like, I get why people don't want to face some of this stuff, but if you face it, that's where the real strength comes from.
Yeah, absolutely. And for our listeners, like I challenge you to think about sometimes it's really hard to recognize what you're going through as something you can manipulate to your benefit. So, like, what are you going through right now that could help you grow? Like, what is tough? What's tough right now for you? And how can you put a positive spin on that? That when I'm through this, or when I get through this, or I have to handle this and take care of this. And once I get to the other side of this, what will I have learned from this? As I think it's so hard in the weeds to see any of that, right? It takes a long time to get to the other side and figure that out. And so I encourage you, like, what is tough for you right now, and what can you do with it? What can you do with that?
Yeah, and not only what you can do with it, how are you managing it? How are you managing it? Are you just trying to sweep it away and move on, or are you going to face it head on too? So if
Yeah.
you had that hardship, I encourage you also to face it, and work your way through that hardship, because that's where you're going to learn the most valuable lessons. And all this stuff it's hard to do. It's not easy, but it's so worth it. And a lot of times too, if you've also, if you've been through a struggle, sometimes it's cool to look back, regardless if it was 10 years ago, 20 years ago, look back at those times and just realize the growth that you did. A lot of times in our profession, especially, we work to help people, and we'll do whatever, we need to do in order to help others, the public, our fellow firefighters. But what are you doing to help yourself too? And sometimes you need to give yourself that grace. You need to give yourself that time and that patience, and you also need to give yourself that high five once in a while to be like, look at what I overcame, look at what I've become. And you don't need to tout it to the world, but it's okay to have a little pride in overcoming those struggles and knowing what it did to you, and then keep hitting the ground and seeing what you can give to the people around you based on what you've been through.
Yeah. And struggle can define you, but I don't want that. Like, I don't want my struggle to have defined me. I want it to have refined me. So it, it forged a different Carrie.
Mm-hmm.
Well, the original Carrie is still there, but it forged something different in me, and tweaked me into something a little different. But I don't want that to define who I am, and I don't want that for any of you as well. I think people get stuck in it sometimes. They get stuck in their struggle.
Yeah.
So like you said, what do you need? What do you need? And how are you facing it? Right? That's all wonderful. Self-reflection is probably my favorite word of 2025. I had authenticity. Authentic was my word of 2023, or I can't remember, 2020. Yeah, 2023. I think my word for this year is self-reflection. It's everything. It's
Yeah.
everything.
Yeah. And, if you find yourself in those environments, and again, we know the cultures that we can be a part of, because sometimes our cultures don't let us move on from our struggles, and our cultures and the people around us identify us based on our struggles. You need to find a group of people that don't do that. That would be my encouragement, right? Like, get yourself out of those. I'm not saying quit your job or anything like that, but find a group of people who are going to help you through those struggles and not identify you by those struggles, because you can't be surrounded by that as well. You need people to help you through that. So that's a big part of it as well.
Yeah.
So, I think the biggest takeaway is your struggles don't disqualify you from leadership. They actually prepare you for it. So, hit that stuff full force, head on, face it, and build your resilience and your leadership ability, because that's where your true growth will happen.
Kyle, this has been a breath of fresh air for me, as always. Uh, like therapy again. So until next time, folks, if you have some ideas for episodes or topics you want us to talk through or talk out loud, we're happy to do so. You can hit us up on social media or shoot us an email, and we'd love to chat with you guys. So thanks for listening.
As we wrap up another episode, this has been Kyle
And Kerry,
from the Heat of Command podcast.
Thank you, as always, for listening. Please make sure to follow and subscribe on Apple, Spotify, and YouTube. And as always, we love the feedback. Keep it coming.
See you next time.